Gravimetric analysis of lead-2 solution. Here are the materials that you need. So to begin, we're going to start by measuring out a known volume of our lead contaminated water sample. So I'm going to use a graduated cylinder to measure out this volume. So we're going to try to calculate how much lead is present in this volume of solution. So I'm measuring out 25 milliliters of this solution here. And I'm going to take my contaminated water and I'm going to add it to a Erlenmeyer flask. This flask has a specific shape that allows for easy swirling, so we chose this for our experiment. So the next thing that I'm going to go ahead and measure out is going to be this sodium sulfate solution. So this sodium sulfate solution, the amount of it isn't really important as long as you have it in excess. So I'm going to take this sodium sulfate and I'm going to measure some of this solution out. And this time I'm going to use 50 milliliters here of this solution. And I'm doing this just so that way I know that the sodium sulfate is in excess. That way I can be sure that all of my lead ions have been removed from the solution. So now I'm going to take this sodium sulfate solution that I've measured out and add it to my lead contaminated solution. And so once I mix those together and swirl it around a bit, we see that this cloudy solid starts to form inside of the solution. So that's going to be my lead sulfate solid. So once this has all reacted, we're going to swirl it very well so we can make sure that the reaction is complete. We need to filter out this solid and separate it from the water that's in the flask. So our next step here is going to be to determine the mass of a piece of filter paper. So I'm going to take this filter paper and I'm going to fold it, write my name on it, and mass it. So first I'm putting my name on here. This is just so whenever it's in the oven you can find it easily. And we want to make sure that we use a pencil because it's non-reactive. So to fold the filter paper, fold it in half to make a taco, and then fold it in half again to make a little pizza slice here. So we'll grab 3 of those 4 layers in order to make a cone shape. So I'm going to go ahead and determine the mass of just the filter paper. So the idea is once I pass my solid through here and dry it, I can subtract out the mass of the filter paper to get just the mass of the solid. So to make that cone shape, we're going to grab 3 of those 4 layers and push open into a cone. And I'm going to put that into my funnel. Now my filter paper isn't sitting very well in my funnel, so I'm just going to use a little bit of my distilled water wash bottle just to get that wet so that it will stick nicely to the sides of the funnel. And I'm just adjusting this so that the solution will drip through into this waste beaker. So I'm going to take some of my solution here and run it through this filter. And we want to be careful to make sure that we don't go past the top of the filter, because then some of the solid might be able to sneak through and end up in my filtrate solution in my waste beaker. So I'm just going to keep adding a little bit more at a time, again being careful not to pour past the edges of the filter paper in the funnel. And once in a while, I'm just going to use a little bit of a wash bottle to rinse off any stuck solid and make sure that ends up in the funnel. So looking at a top view, we can see that there's my solution almost to the top of the filter paper, but not quite there. We also want to be careful that no solution gets down along the edges there where we can see those different layers of the filter paper. So this is going to be allowed to just drip through, continuing to add more of my mixture in order to filter it. Now eventually I've filtered through all of the liquid, but there's still all of this solid stuck to the sides of my Erlenmeyer flask. So I'm going to use my wash bottle here with distilled water just to wash down the sides of the beaker so that I can get all of that solid out. So that looks a little bit better. I'm going to go ahead and do it again to try to get more of that solid. So the mass of this solid helps us understand how much lead was in the original 25 milliliters of my water sample. So I want to make sure I get it all out. So just swirling to get the edges of the flask and then pouring into my funnel. So when we look in the top here, we can see our solid that we've collected in the filter paper. So we're going to allow this to kind of drip all the way through, and then we can carefully remove the filter paper and place this onto a watch glass. So this is just a little glass plate that can hold our filter paper. I'm going to go ahead and use these tweezers to kind of carefully open up the filter paper. So now I'm going to need to allow this to dry. We need to remove all of the water here. So we're going to take our watch plate and sample over to the oven here. And this is just going to be some low heat to help that water evaporate. Now, I want to test to make sure I got all of the lead out of that water. So this is the filtrate that came off of our solution. And I'm adding some more sodium sulfate to the solution. And you see that it remains clear. We don't form any more solid. So this means that I'm confident that all of that lead has been removed from that water sample. Now that this has dried in the oven, I'm going to go ahead and determine its final mass. And I can subtract those two masses to get the mass of solid produced.